All right, we're going to bring in now former White House attorney under the Trump administration, Ty Cobb. We're pleased to have you with us. Appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday.
My pleasure. Nice to be with you.
So let's dive right in. What do you make of the testimony laid out in the case so far?
So I think the trial has, proceeded relatively quickly. I think the state has, scheduled its witnesses in an interesting fashion, obviously a strategic fashion. They seem to think that putting Michael Cohen on at the end after most of the evidence is in, will help buttress his credibility. And to some extent, I think that's true. I also think, however, that having him near the end is a challenge a little bit because the defense will eviscerate him. There's no way Michael Cohen comes off as credible or anything other than smarmy. On the other hand, certain of the things that he'll testify about are established by the business records that they put in tediously yesterday. So I think the case is built to a conclusion where Michael Cohen is on center stage, and it'll be interesting to see whether he survives.
Talk a little bit about Michael Cohen's history. People call him a known liar. What do you think the defense is going to do when you say they're going to eviscerate him? What do you think they're going to say? Well,
he has told so many lies in so many different venues, from Congress to the courtroom. Remember his most recent lie in the Judge Engoron trial, the fraud trial, was that he actually was innocent of charges that he pled guilty to under oath. That's a pretty interesting concession, because it is an admission from him that he is a perjurer. I think that the jury's going to struggle with that. The government, the state, will argue, aggressively that just because he's lied in the past doesn't mean he's lying now. Look at the corroboration, to the extent there is corroboration. But I think the real difficulty here for the state has always been trying to tie these payments primarily to a campaign finance violation. I think that is going to be a significant issue if Trump is convicted on appeal. I think there are other issues on appeal as well, obviously, including the graphic testimony from Stormy Daniels that was admitted, but also much of the evidence could be challenged under that Weinstein ruling that came down last week in terms of other bad acts. So it's going to be a challenge on appeal. I think this jury will convict Trump, but it remains to be seen.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that graphic testimony. You worked in Trump's administration. Some analysts are really surprised that the defense didn't make more objections when Stormy Daniels is talking about all this. I mean, it just kind of makes people uncomfortable, right, with this, about this alleged sexual encounter. Was this a mistake that the defense didn't jump in even more? Or do you think it's some sort of long-term game plan where it's actually going to help Trump on appeal, for example?
So I don't think it was planned that they wouldn't jump in. I think they were reluctant to jump in because of the extent to which this had been litigated prior to trial. There were many motions trying to limit the testimony prior to trial. I think the defense, as they argued in court, was under the impression that the Judge Merchan, had already blessed a lot of this testimony, and therefore they didn't want to jump up and down and keep having their objections overruled. On the other hand, the judge himself has made plain that he was startled that they didn't object more. They could have objected more, but they've preserved their objections between the pretrial motions and the number of times they did object during her testimony. Not to everything, perhaps, but I don't think it was a fatal error on the part of the lawyers. I think that the lawyers actually have done the best they can with what they have. Keep in mind, though, they're very hampered in this case by Trump's denial of having had a sexual relationship with Stormy Daniels. I don't think there's anybody in the country that doesn't believe they had a sexual encounter, but Trump insists that they did not, and that allows the prosecution to develop a lot of testimony, a lot of detail, to make it plain that they actually did have that liaison.
Right, and then, sorry to hop in here,
sure,
but then if Trump then takes the stand, and he's saying he didn't do it, whether he did or he did, it could open him up to perjuring himself, right? So do you think what the prosecution is trying to do is ensure that the president will not The former president will not take the stand?
So I don't think they have anything to worry about there. The former president was never going to testify.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of News Nation's fact-driven coverage.